If you stay tuned to this week's video, I'm going to give you a profile of a couple of important people to me who've passed away in the last couple of weeks, big people in the abolitionist community. As well, I'm going to tell you a bit more about things that have happened with the federal death penalty in the United States, as well as a massive global human rights event that you can take part in. In the last few days, I tried to make a slightly different video, and I'm redoing it today, so I didn't post it. This is a revised version of it. Really had to do with the fact that in the last 2 weeks, we've lost a couple of very important people in the abolitionist community. So I really wanted to dedicate my vlog to them and their memories, as well as to remind you all about really important situation going on with the federal death penalty in the United States. Amnesty International is not alone in working to end the death penalty. We're part of a global movement that includes people from countries, organizations, and religions all around the world. We come to our position against the death penalty from a variety of different perspectives. Sadly, we lost a couple of giants from the abolitionist world in the last 2 weeks. This past week, we lost Professor Roger Hood, who was a champion for the study of criminology and a staunch death penalty opponent. Only the week before, we lost Bill Pelke, who was the founder of the Journey of Hope and one of the leading voices for murder victims' families for human rights. That said, we did have some good news this past week, that during the United Nations Third Committee meeting, there was an overwhelming majority of states supporting a call for a moratorium on the use of the death penalty with a view to global abolition. The call at the UN for a moratorium on executions with a view to global abolition has only passed third committee stage, and it will be going to a vote at the General Assembly in the coming weeks. In this week's vlog, I'm going to introduce you to the lives of those two incredible people and how they worked to oppose capital punishment. Today's video is personal. I knew and met Bill Pelke and Roger Hood on a number of occasions. Both were incredible people. Both were caring, intelligent, and generous advocates for abolition. Their journeys to the abolitionist movement represent, as they say, two sides of the same coin. Bill Pelke died suddenly last week while shoveling snow at his home in Alaska. He was tireless in his advocacy. Bill was not always an opponent of the death penalty. He supported it. When his grandmother was murdered, he initially supported the death sentence that was given to the young woman convicted in her killing. It did not take long, however, for Bill to change his mind on the death penalty. An important side note to this story: until 2005, the United States was the leading executioner of child offenders in the world. Contrary to international law, the United States would sentence to death offenders who were less than 18 years old at the time of the offense. Fortunately, in 2005, the United States Supreme Court finally ended the execution of child offenders. However, unfortunately, in many cases, this is replaced with life without the possibility of parole. That's a human rights tragedy that is still contravening international law and is still being resolved today. Bill's mother, Ruth, was murdered in 1985. Ruth was a 78-year-old Bible teacher who had invited in a group of teenage girls believing that they wanted Bible lessons. They attacked Ruth and murdered her while seeking money. The attack was brutal. Although it was a group, only one, Paula Cooper, who was 15 years old at the time of the murder, was convicted and sentenced to death. She was only 16 at the time of sentencing, and at that age, she became the youngest person on death row in the entire United States. Bill had a hard time dealing with the brutal murder. He felt at first that the death sentence was appropriate, but during the trial, Bill also saw Paula's grandfather. Bill has said, "My grandmother would not have wanted this old man to witness his teenage granddaughter die." The more he thought about it, the more convinced Bill was that his grandmother would have wanted love and compassion for Paula. Within 3 weeks of her being sentenced to death, Bill had forgiven Paula and became one of her strongest advocates, eventually helping commute her sentence and obtain freedom after serving 27 years in prison for a crime that she committed when she was only 15. Tragically, Paula had a hard time with the outside world. While inside, she had still managed to turn her life around and had the support of Bill. In prison, she obtained her GED, a vocational degree, and a bachelor's degree. Paula took her own life in 2015, just shy of completing her period of parole for a crime that happened 30 years before. Bill was an Army veteran. He'd served in the Vietnam War and was a devout Christian. In 1993, he co-founded Journey of Hope and led missions around the world to bring his message opposing the death penalty and finding ways for murder victim families to truly heal. The Washington Post obituary quoting him from 2009 states, "The death penalty has absolutely nothing to do with the healing the murder victim's family members need when a loved one is killed. It just continues the cycle of violence and creates more murder victim family members." I will miss you, Bill. May you rest in peace and finally be with Ruth and Paula. The other giant we have lost, Professor Roger Hood, passed away just a few days ago. Roger Hood was an emeritus professor of criminology at the University of Oxford and an emeritus fellow at All Souls College. Roger Hood has written countless papers and numerous books on the death penalty. Most notably, The Death Penalty, A Worldwide Perspective, which is now in its 5th edition. It was co-authored with Carolyn Hoyle for the 4th and 5th editions. I was lucky enough to meet Professor Hood several times at the World Congress Against the Death Penalty, which is held every 3 years by the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty. Roger Hood had recently finished work on the death penalty in the Caribbean before becoming ill. After a short illness, he passed away at the age of 84. His obituary from Oxford University notes, quote, "He was a man of high principle and unimpeachable integrity, an anti-racist before the term had been invented, and a fierce opponent of the death penalty, a cause which absorbed much of his time after his supposed retirement in 2003. Roger believed that criminology should not only be an academic discipline, but also a resource to be deployed in the struggle for both legal and social justice." End of quote. Professor Hood had been a consultant to the United Nations on the death penalty and was responsible for the UN Secretary General's reports on the 5th, 6th, and 7th quinquennial surveys of capital punishment in 1995, 2000 to 2001, and 2004 to 2005. I will remember him as a kind and generous man. He helped to advance the academic understanding of the death penalty. The facts around the law, practice, and impact of capital punishment could only be understood through him. Very few have reached the level of legal and practical understanding of the practice of state killing that Professor Hood reached. I'll miss you, Roger. The loss of both these great abolitionists is a blow to the spirit. Executions are also a blow to the spirit. But as activists and abolitionists, we have learned to seize these blows instead as motivation. I will continue to use books and papers from Professor Hood, and I will continue to admire the outstanding effort Bill and other murder victims' families have made in opposing the death penalty. On that note, Thursday night this past week, Orlando Hall was executed in the United States. His execution, the 8th federal execution this year, and I remind you that until this year, there had not been one federal execution in 17 years, was the first time in 131 years that a lame duck US government carried out any executions. I will link at the end of this video my last video where I told you about the appalling spate of federal executions that have already happened this year, not including Orlando Hall, and the very easy steps that you can take to help stop more of these executions from happening. I also want to point out that we are nearing the 10th of December, which is World Human Rights Day. On the 10th of December, or close to the 10th of December, Amnesty International hosts global Write for Rights events. If you go to writeathon.ca, write-a-thon is all one word, and I'll put a link below, you can find out more about this year's profile cases, how to take part in the world's biggest annual human rights celebration. You can sign up for events yourself, you can host your own event and post it for other people to join you. Please stay tuned for next week's video. Please stay safe, healthy, and warm. Thank you for watching this video. For more information on the death penalty and human rights, please click on the subscribe link below. Likes and comments are appreciated. If you'd like to support or donate to Amnesty International Canada, please go to amnesty.ca. If you're outside of Canada, please go to amnesty.org and find your local section.